Jesus' disciples raised the inquiry, said, Lord, teach us to pray. And Jesus instructed them, pray like this: Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is where I want to drop my anchor this morning. Give us this day our daily bread. I'll stop there. I want to talk about praying for God's supply. Praying for God's supply. Every day for many of us, when it's time for us to awake from our sleep and slumber, we're not always the most excited. Oftentimes, because we know as soon as our feet hit the floor, reality is soon to hit us in the face. For some of us, we don't jump out of the bed with excitement and exuberance, with the expectation of a new day, because we know that there is something within the day that's going to challenge us. Every day we get up, we are forced to deal with two discouraging realities that are married together. The first one is this: we need bread to survive. That's human vulnerability. No matter who we are, we realize this, that bread is the universal term of need. All of us need something in our lives, because no matter what, after you pay one bill, 30 days later, another bill is coming. We need the bread of strength, because there's always some task, some project on our job that is always demanding our immediate attention. Someone needs the bread of strength and creativity because you have children that are in your care, and that you need the bread of strength and creativity so you can help shape their culture. Many of us, we need the bread of moral consciousness so we're able to see the injustices that are in the world, and just not see what's wrong that is in the world, but be moved to some meaningful action to make the world a better place. The reality is we all need something. Somebody can testify, Reverend, I came to church, I missed an hour of sleep, I'm trying to concentrate on what you're telling me, but there's something in my life that I need, and I can hardly concentrate because it's always bothering me. Have you ever been there, that you've been in a room, but your mind has been on the other side of town because there has been some significant need that has literally taken over your existence? We're all in need of something. We need bread. That's human vulnerability. But this is the second discouraging reality, is this: we can't meet our own needs. That's human inability. What a sobering reality for many of us. It doesn't matter who you are, none of us have enough strength to meet all of the demands in our lives. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank, who your hookup is, what is the letters behind your name. We can't meet our own needs because there is something within us that says there is insufficient energy, there's insufficient funds, there's insufficient creativity within us to meet the demand of all of our needs. The person who looks at these realities, if they don't know Christ, they'll have a bleak outlook. When we look at these two realities, that there is human vulnerability and human inability, someone says, well, What is the world? Why should we live? Why should we even keep getting up in the morning? But those of us who know God and have experienced a level of intimacy with God, we know this despite the reality of our human vulnerability and our human inability, it's a possibility for us to meet up with God's provision. Every now and then, God allows you to be aware of what's wrong in your life and what you cannot do on your own, so you can be placed on a collision course with God's provision. And that's God's word for somebody this morning. You get up with the hope and the expectation, despite of the discouraging realities of your life, is this: that God can provide. Is there anybody in this sanctuary at this last service that can testify that God can provide? And God tells his disciples, because you're in a position of limitation, this is how I want you to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. Jesus knew these disciples, they had a rough journey ahead. So he says, while you're praying, I want you to look to me for divine strength. This is the first of the final three petitions of the Lord's Prayer, and they capture the totality of life. This prayer, Jesus instructs his disciples that lets them know that they do have needs that must be met. Can I tell you something, church? Just because you make God number one, and because the kingdom agenda is paramount in your life, it does not erase your human needs. That's what I came to tell somebody. Somebody can testify that you are on the Lord's side. You pressed your way to church this morning, but you still had your own set of problems, your own set of needs that you need God to provide. I came to tell somebody your spirituality does not erase your humanity. Move people out of my way that says just because you're spiritual, you won't have any rough days. Just because you're spiritual, you won't have some needs and some desires that you need met. Listen, because I'm spiritual doesn't erase what I have going on in my house. Somebody can testify, I love the Lord, but I still got some bills. I love God, but student loans are still weighing me down. I love God, but I have a family that's always pulling on me and draining me. Yes, I love God, but I still have needs. Look at your neighbor this morning and say, neighbor, I know I look good on the outside, but there's still some needs that need to be met inside of my life. That's why Jesus tells these disciples, when you pray, I want you to bring your physical and your spiritual need and place them at God's feet. This is the take-home truth. God provides us the privilege of prayer to experience his unlimited supply of provision. I say that again. God provides us the privilege of prayer to experience his unlimited supply of provision. This is the deed to do. Pray, fully aware of your great need physically and spiritually, and God's limitless supply. Let's walk through this text. The first thing we notice is this: we have a need for God's supply. This prayer opens with a simple word, but a profound word: give. Give us this day our daily bread. Can we be honest this morning? You seldom ask anybody to give you anything if you can get it on your own. I mean, we live in an isolated world. If you have it, you're not going to even waste and expend your energy to pick up the phone, call anyone, send a SOS, a smoke signal, or anything else to tell someone to give you something. But when you ask someone to give, it shows that you are in need. This word give paints a picture of a child in need of parental provision. Listen, this request, give us this day our daily bread, points us to two larger truths in our lives. And the first one is this: our nature is weak. Our nature is weak. Every day we get up, we're doing something. We get up out of the bed, cook breakfast, go work out, go to work, take a lunch, go back to work, repeat it all over again. And the question is why? Because it's a part of our routine. It's a part of our existence. And someone can testify, no matter how routine your life is and how familiar you are with the rigors of life, life still has a way of draining you. Can we be honest? Can you adjust the halo this morning over your head? Life has a way of draining you. Going to work, being a husband, being a wife, being there for everybody else. It has a way of draining you even when you know it's your calling. Lean in, child of God. Somebody can testify your calling comes with some complications. I'm called to do some stuff, but even while I'm on the journey, my calling has me in some conflicted positions, and sometimes I'm just tired. The fact of the matter is this: the very engagement of prayer says this: I'm weak and God is strong. The very fact when you bow on your knees or when you pause and pray, it shouts to God that I am the lesser and you are the greater. I am the minus, you are the plus. I am the liability and you are the asset. Many of us don't know that because we haven't prayed lately. But not only does it point to the reality is that our nature is weak, but this is the second implication, church. Our networks are weak. Consider the classroom. Consider the pupils that are in this classroom of prayer that Jesus is instructing in. You have Matthew, a tax collector. You have Peter, who's a fisherman. You have Philip, who's a man of influence. You have Andrew, who introduces people to Jesus. You have James and John, who comes from an influential household, because after all, it was their mother who came to Jesus and asked Jesus, Lord, when you come into your kingdom, I want one of my boys to sit on the left and the other to sit on my right. So it's safe to assert that these are men of influence and they have networks and they are tied to people who have something. Safe to say many of us, we're people of influence. You have networks. Everybody knows somebody. People are what makes the world go round. Everybody has a hookup. Everybody knows somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. But this is the word for our lives. There comes a time, even in our lives, when the people we know and the relationships that we have are insufficient. This past week, I was in Minden, Louisiana. I was talking to a group of preachers. And one of the sagely preachers, one of the elder statesmen, began to talk about how he had 330 acres of land. And on that land, there's oil. It awakened the entrepreneur in me out of hibernation. Shade tree entrepreneur, but entrepreneur all the way. And my mind started moving. 330 acres, all on the land. And the preacher must have saw that there was a calculator inscribed in my brow. He responded, oh, preacher, don't worry. He said, it doesn't produce like it once did. Lean in, child of God. on a higher and holier level. Many of us have acres of friendships, relationships, acquaintances, and social organizations that we are a part of, but somebody can testify that you live long enough that what you are connected to cannot produce at the rate of your need. And that's why you need God. When you pray, Lord, give us, you're not praying for a resource. You're not praying for a hookup. You're not praying for a middleman. You're praying to God, who is the source. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I don't need somebody that knows somebody. I need God. That's why the old saints would say it like this. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. And I wonder, do I have at least 25 people that can testify that you need God? We have a need for God's supply. But secondly, there's the need of our neighbor. Listen to the text again. Give us this day our daily bread. This is more than a personal plea. This prayer also has some social implications. Listen, Jesus instructs his disciples, while you're praying for your needs, don't forget about the needs of somebody else. There are two things that no Christian should be found counted or numbered among. Number one is taking advantage of someone else. No Christian, I don't care if everybody else is doing it, but no believer should be found taking advantage of someone else. And the second one is no Christian should be found looking over or ignoring human need. That's the word for us. The problem is sometimes we're too churchy. You too churchy. Sometimes we too scared to be found talking to the prostitute. You too churchy, you scared of what people are going to say about you if they see you engaging, talking to the neighborhood street pharmacist. You too afraid of what people are going to say about you if they find you conversing with the girl who has a checkered past. Listen, Joel Gregory says religious busyness tramples over human need. And sometimes we have suffered or settled to be churchy and we cease to be Christian. Jesus tells his disciples, when you pray, you have to pay attention to the people that you are called to. O.B. Hendricks, in his book, The Politics of Jesus, he says this, and I repeat it again this week: your prayer may be private, but it should never be individual. But then he moves further in this section of give us this day our daily bread. He says, when the disciples prayed this prayer, they are also praying that Caesar's kingdom come to a close. The Roman Empire always had the proclivity to make sure only certain people had bread. And the people who had bread was always the rich. So it was always a difference between the haves and the have-nots. So when the disciples prayed, give us this day our daily bread, this was also a prayer against the Roman Empire. Does that not sound like America to you? When you pray, this is an appropriate and a needed prayer for us today. When we pray, we shouldn't just be praying for ourselves, but we have to pray for those who are the left behind and on the margins of society. Give us this day our daily bread. When we say give us, this prayer is an antibiotic against selfishness. Howard Thurman says this: how can you be happy living in heaven and your brother is living in hell every day? And I thought I raised that this morning, New Hope. How can you be satisfied? Somebody said, Reverend, I don't see hell. I don't see fire and brimstone. I tell you what hell is. Hell is when if you can get a great education, if you can afford private schools. That's hell. Hell is our children still need pre-K. Hell is when you have a Congress and a state senate that won't provide money for after-school programs. That's hell. Hell is they tell you not to get an abortion, but hell is they won't give you money to help you raise your children because you fell on hard times. That's hell. How can you be happy living in heaven and your brother is living in hell every day? Church, we have a responsibility just not to pray for ourselves, but pray for everybody else. I grew up in a small little church in Cleveland, small traditional church. And every Sunday we had this thing called altar call. Altar call, y'all, was after announcements, right before the song before the sermon. That's when the saints would come down and they'll lift up their prayer requests, and then somebody would break out in this song, pray for me. Pray for me. Oh, my brother, pray for me. But this is my part. They say, when you bow at the altar, please, please don't forget to pray for me. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, while you're asking God for your blessings, don't forget to pray for me. While you're asking God to bless your children, don't forget about my children. While you praying God to bless your child that's in the army, don't forget about my child that's in the Navy. Whatever you do, don't forget to pray for me. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, don't forget to pray for me. I'm done today. But finally, we have to look at the nature of God's supply. When we pray, church, we exchange our need for God's provision. There is no doubt this morning that we are all in need of God's provision because there's something inside of us that is insufficient that we cannot provide for ourselves. But there are two things that we have to notice about God's provision. It's incremental. Give us this day our daily bread. When you read this in the original language, this word daily literally means my daily ration. This seems like God is being abusive. This is the term of, this reminds us God does not have to meet our excessive requests. God is obligated to meet our need. Doesn't that turn prosperity theology on its head? The fact of the matter is everybody won't have overflow. Everybody will not be a millionaire. Everybody will not drive a Bentley, but that does not mean that you are not living close to God or your life does not have purpose. He says, give us this day our daily bread. He says, I can't give it all to you at once because if I give it to you all at once, you have a proclivity to run away. Who am I talking to today? God says, I can't give you all the blessings because I know you'll run off with the blessings. So I give you just enough because I know it'll keep you at my feet. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, God is not trying to abuse you. He's trying to keep you at his feet. This prayer is steeped in the Old Testament when the children of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 long years, and oftentimes they found themselves one day away from starvation. And as soon as they felt like they were about to die, God came in and was a sanctified maitre d', and he gave them manna from on heaven. And that's what God does when it feels like we are about to lose it, and when all is lost, that's when God steps in. That's a word for somebody. You've been complaining, but God has still been providing. I believe I say that again. You've been complaining, but God has still been providing. No, you don't drive what everybody else drives, but you still got a car. No, you don't live where everybody else lives, but God keeps a roof over your head. No, you're not wearing Chanel and Louis Vuitton, but you're not naked. God keeps on providing. And is there anybody here that can testify, I'm not worried about somebody else's blessings. I'm just going to thank God for the provisions that he's given me. Hey, oh Lord, let me quit before this thing get away from me. But finally, when we pray, it's a prayer for us to be industrious. Industrious. Give us this day our daily bread. There's another turn on this phrase. When you read this in the original language, it literally reads, give me enough today so I can serve tomorrow. So this leaves us with the looming question, what should we do with the Lord's bread? What do you do? You've been praying. You've been asking God. You've been beating on heaven's door. God bless me. What should you do with heaven's bread? You ought to flourish spiritually. You ought to want to grow up in God. You ought not want to stay at the same level. You ought to fight for the education of children. You ought to fight against sex trafficking. God gives you bread not so you can be satisfied, but so you can work harder for God's kingdom. I know that's not sexy, but it's the truth. God does not provide for us just so we can be satisfied. We live now in a season where there's a campaign against bread in the name of being healthy, fitness, and losing weight. I don't eat any bread. Bread ain't good for you. And your mama and your grandmama and your great-grandmama been feeding you bread with every meal. Yeah. Oh, no bread, no bread. But the issue is not bread. Bread is a carb. And unused carbs turn to fat. And fat is simply unused energy. Lean in, child of God. Many of us have settled to be well-fed Christians. And we have become fat on the bread of God. And God is saying, what are you going to do with my bread? He's saying, don't waste my bread. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, whatever you do, don't waste God's bread. And somebody can testify, you don't need to take bread out of your diet. You need bread to be reintroduced to your diet. I need bread. Give us this day our daily bread. I tell you what you do when you pray this prayer. You bathe it in the words of William Williams when he wrote these words, guide me, O thou great Jehovah. Pilgrims through this barren land, I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. This is the shout part, bread of heaven. Bread of heaven. Feed me till I want no more. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I need bread. I need the bread of strength to keep on fighting. I need the bread of stability so I can fight the good fight of faith. I need the bread of sensitivity so I can take care of my neighbor. Just look at somebody and say, neighbor, I serve a giving God. God gave light to the stars. He gave the brightness to the moon. He gave Rahab a rope. He gave Abraham a promise. He gave the children of Israel a sidewalk in the middle of the sea. But God says that ain't enough. My children need something more. He says, for God so loved the world
that he gave. He gave sight to the blind man. He gave arms to those who had no arms. He's a giving God. Just touch somebody and say, neighbor, I serve a giving God. He gave his hand to the nails, gave his side to the spear, gave his feet to the nails, and he died. Didn't he die? I said he died. Didn't he die? But he didn't stop giving. He gave his body to Joseph's new tomb. But right early Sunday morning, he got up with all power in his hands. And then he gave Joseph back his tomb, gave the seamstress his grave clothes, but he kept on giving. He gave me salvation. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I serve a giving God. He gave me salvation. So this is my song. The Lord is blessing me right now. What did he do? He woke me up this morning, started me on my way. Shake somebody's hand and say, neighbor, he's blessing me right now. I'm getting the word right now. I'm getting set free right now. Shout yeah. Shake somebody's hand and say, neighbor, hold on. Whatever you need, God's got it. Whatever you need, he's got everything. I dare you, just touch 3 people on their shoulder and tell them he's got everything that you need. He got strength. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. He'll give you peace of mind. He'll keep your mind in perfect peace. He'll give you a brand new day. Shake somebody's hand. Tell them today may be bad, but tell them hold on. Hold on just a little while longer, because weeping may endure for a night, but joy, the door is open. I gotta quit. Won't he take care of you? Won't he walk with you? Won't he hold your hand? No, he will. I know he will. I know he will. Can somebody just shout, yes, he will? Just get somebody by the hand and say, yes, he will. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. He may not come when you want him, but he's always I ain't got to ask nobody. I know he will supply. Just look at somebody and tell them, I don't got to ask nobody about this. I know he will.
is blessing me right now. I may not have everything I want, but he's taking care of my needs. The psalmist said, I was young, but now I'm old. I've never seen the righteous forsaken. I ain't got old yet, but I'm the seed. I said, I'm the seed, and I've never been begging for bread. It's been tight, but I'm still fed. Look at somebody, tell them, neighbor, it's been tight, but I'm still fed. I've cried, but he still took care of me. Yeah. Yeah.